What if I told you that a country once struggling with food shortages is now making history with record-breaking agricultural achievements? Burkina Faso, under the bold and visionary leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, is rewriting the rules of African agriculture. His government has launched an aggressive push toward food security, and the results are nothing short of astounding. The latest proof of this success is an astonishing 7,700-ton potato harvest, a feat once deemed impossible in the country's arid climate. This breakthrough is not an isolated event, but part of a larger movement to make Burkina Faso self-sufficient in food production.
What happens when a country that was once reliant on foreign food aid suddenly says, no more? In the heart of West Africa, where the Sahel's dry winds meet the stubborn soil of the landlocked nation of Burkina Faso, a quiet revolution is unfolding. But this time, it's not about bullets. It's about bread, and it's being led by a man who refuses to beg. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's youthful and defiant president, is doing what no one thought possible in modern West Africa. He's feeding a nation, not through imports or handouts, but through local production. From sprawling rice paddies along the banks of the Muhun River to dryland sorghum farms resurrected with traditional irrigation techniques, the country is writing a new chapter in African food sovereignty, one that doesn't involve dependency on the World Bank, France, or even ECOWAS. It started with an ultimatum: starve under the weight of foreign control or survive through self-determination. A nation on the brink. Less than 2 years ago, Burkina Faso was facing the edge of famine. Displaced by terrorism, battered by climate shocks, and weakened by an economy long strangled by neo-colonial structures, over 2.6 million people were internally displaced. The fields were empty, the stores even emptier. Relief agencies, while present, were overwhelmed, and more importantly, conditional. The moment Traoré's government began taking bold steps to cut ties with ECOWAS and shift geopolitical alliances toward Russia and China, funding and food shipments began to dwindle. Western media called it reckless. ECOWAS labeled it suicidal. Critics shouted, "How will he feed the people now?" But that was the question Traoré had already been asking, long before his government was accused of isolating the country. In his view, relying on food aid was not a solution. It was a leash. So, he turned to the land. Revolution on the farm. Traoré's first move wasn't flashy. It didn't involve new high-tech tractors or genetically modified seeds from abroad. Instead, he went back to the elders. In rural provinces like Koudougou, Bobo Dioulasso, and Tenkodogo, traditional farming cooperatives were revived with state support. Youth brigades, previously jobless and disillusioned, were trained in organic farming, soil regeneration, and small-scale irrigation using recycled materials. Agricultural extension officers, once underfunded and demoralized, were deployed in force with a new mission: teach every able-bodied Burkinabe how to grow something. Schoolyards became gardens. Abandoned government land was handed to farming collectives. Even prison yards were turned into cassava and maize plots. Traoré's motto was clear: if we don't control what we eat, we will never control what we become. The seeds of freedom. Within the first 8 months of the program, food production rose by 28%, a figure that stunned both regional economists and ECOWAS analysts who had predicted economic collapse. But Traoré wasn't interested in validation from Brussels or Paris. He was interested in the markets of Kaya, where for the first time in years, local women were selling tomatoes grown from their own yards, not trucked in from Côte d'Ivoire. A new system of seed banks was launched, focused entirely on indigenous crops like fonio, millet, groundnut, and shea. No GMOs, no licensing fees, just seeds, freely traded, freely grown. Some called it archaic, but in Traoré's Burkina Faso, it was liberation. And yet this agricultural rebirth didn't just happen in isolation. It was part of a broader realignment, a fundamental rethinking of what sovereignty meant in an Africa that had been structurally dependent for decades. Because Traoré knew, if the West couldn't control your military, they would try to control your meals. And if you take both back, you become dangerous.
The country is experiencing a massive transformation that is restoring hope, creating jobs, and positioning Burkina Faso as a future agricultural powerhouse in Africa. What exactly sparked this transformation? What strategies have been implemented, and how is the government ensuring these gains are sustainable? Most importantly, can this agricultural revolution be replicated across Africa? Stay with us as we unravel this groundbreaking movement and analyze what it means for the continent.
Underground markets, overground resistance. In a world addicted to imports, what happens when a nation builds its own supply chain from scratch? Underground. As the regional powers panicked over Ibrahim Traoré's rejection of Western aid, something far more threatening to their grip on African economies was quietly taking shape beneath their radar. Burkina Faso was building its own food distribution networks. No dependency, no strings attached. Just locals feeding locals, and a government willing to bet everything on that principle. What started as an agricultural revival quickly evolved into a full-scale restructuring of the country's food economy. And ECOWAS didn't see it coming. The blacklist and the backroads. Following Traoré's refusal to bow to ECOWAS pressure or reverse ties with Russia, sanctions and isolation followed. Borders tightened, trade slowed. Burkina Faso was unofficially blacklisted from critical trade corridors, especially those involving foreign food imports and manufactured fertilizers. The country's access to coastal ports, its lifeline to global supply chains, was deliberately restricted, but Traoré saw the blockade as a catalyst, not a curse. If the front door is locked, he reportedly told his council, we'll build 100 back doors. Burkina's response wasn't to beg for reinstatement. It was to activate ancient networks of overland trade that predated colonial borders. Farmers and traders, many of them women and youth, began moving goods through forgotten backroads, centuries-old caravan paths, and newly guarded rural corridors. What emerged was a shadow supply chain, legal in intent, informal in design, and impossible to control. Food moved, people ate, and ECOWAS had no idea how. Food sovereignty in action. This underground market system wasn't just about feeding the cities. It was a living rejection of Western-style, dependency-based economies. Traoré's administration didn't just want food, it wanted power in the hands of producers. Middlemen were cut out. Farmers received direct support from the state, not through aid intermediaries or foreign NGOs, but through community cooperatives backed by local councils. Prices stabilized, not through IMF controls or foreign currency fluctuations, but through a simple principle. When people feed themselves, they don't panic. In the capital, Ouagadougou municipal gardens began supplying schools and hospitals. Rooftop gardens were incentivized through tax credits. Across peri-urban neighborhoods, state-sponsored compost and water harvesting systems were installed. The results? For the first time in 15 years, the price of basic staples like millet and maize fell, even while global inflation soared. And while foreign analysts shook their heads in disbelief, ordinary Burkinabe felt something deeper: dignity, the ECOWAS dilemma. By mid-2025, a disturbing trend emerged for ECOWAS observers. Burkina Faso was not only surviving, it was inspiring imitation. Mali and Niger, emboldened by similar populist waves, began looking inward as well. Local food programs sprouted up. Joint agricultural workshops were held without a single Western NGO present. A new alliance, unofficial but undeniable, was being forged among the so-called Sahel Three. ECOWAS leaders feared a domino effect. If three landlocked, formerly aid-dependent countries could build self-reliant food systems, what excuse would Ghana, Nigeria, or Senegal have for remaining under the thumb of World Bank-dictated policy? But instead of adapting, the old guard doubled down. Sanctions intensified. Western media launched smear campaigns against Traoré's dictatorship. Threats of intervention grew louder. Yet inside Burkina Faso, the mood was defiant. One popular radio show summed it up: "Let them block our rice, we'll grow yams. Let them freeze our accounts, we'll trade in trust. Let them take their aid, we've already started feeding ourselves." This wasn't isolation, it was insulation from exploitation, interference, and dependence. The spirit of Sankara reborn. The last time Burkina Faso saw such a bold reimagining of agriculture and self-reliance was under Thomas Sankara in the 1980s. A revolutionary who planted trees and banned foreign cars for ministers, Sankara dreamed of a Burkina that stood on its own feet. Many say Traoré is Sankara's ideological heir, but with a modern twist. While Sankara died for his ideals, Traoré is weaponizing them. He isn't begging for forgiveness from France. He isn't applying for debt relief. He's simply asking his people to believe that they are enough, that their land is enough, that with discipline, structure, and grit, a people can unshackle themselves from generations of economic slavery. And with every truckload of onions grown in Fata and Gourma, every new beehive in rural Gnagna, Every seedling nursery launched in Djibo, Traore's bet is paying off.
As Burkina Faso continues to write its success story, one thing is clear. The world is watching, and Africa is taking notes. The potato flood might just be the beginning of a new era for Burkina Faso, and perhaps for the entire continent. Remember, folks, this is more than just a story about potatoes or wheat or tomatoes. It's a story about hope, determination, and the power of visionary leadership. It's a story that proves that with the right approach, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome.
The hands that feed the nation. What if the answer to hunger wasn't in billion-dollar programs, but in the very people society often overlooks? In the new Burkina Faso, the most unexpected heroes are not generals or foreign investors. They are women who once sold mangoes on roadside stalls, youth who once dreamed of escaping to Europe, even prisoners serving long sentences. Under Ibrahim Traoré's revolution, they've become the backbone of an unbreakable food system, one built by the people, for the people. If parts 1 and 2 of this story showed us how Burkina Faso started feeding itself without foreign help, this part reveals who's really doing the feeding. And it's not who the world expected. The mothers of the land. In towns like Ouahigouya and Boromo, women's cooperatives are leading the charge in agricultural innovation and distribution. Known locally as les mères nourricières, the mothers who feed, these networks are not only growing crops, but running entire community food banks. Traditionally sidelined in government planning, these women are now at the front lines of Burkina Faso's food resilience. Traoré's government provided micro-grants, not from the IMF, but directly from state revenues earned through local trade and gold sales. The women used them not for luxury but for land, organizing group leases and transforming fallow spaces into high-yield communal farms. One such cooperative in Kombasiri turned 5 hectares of dry land into a thriving vegetable and poultry hub that now feeds 3 surrounding districts. No foreign fertilizer, no European consultants, just local compost, shared labor, and generational knowledge. When asked what changed, the cooperative leader simply said,
"The government stopped treating us as victims and started treating us as partners."
That shift in mindset has done more than any foreign food program ever could. The youth brigades. From despair to duty. Unemployment among young people in Burkina Faso once hovered around 40%. Many were tempted by the promise of migration or worse, recruitment by terrorist groups in the Sahel. But Traoré's administration gave them a new mission: rebuild the nation, one seed at a time. Under the National Youth Agribusiness Corps, NYAC, thousands of young Burkinabe were enlisted not to fight wars, but to till land, install irrigation systems, and reforest degraded areas. These brigades operate like military units, uniformed, structured, but focused entirely on productivity. From the border town of Diebougou to the dusty outskirts of Dori, youth are now leading massive agroforestry campaigns. In less than a year, NYAC has planted over 2.5 million trees and cultivated 14,000 hectares of previously unutilized land. One 22-year-old graduate, Fatou Traore, now oversees a cluster of fish ponds and rice paddies built from scratch by her NYAC team.
"Before, we waited for jobs," she says. "Now, we create them."
This isn't youth empowerment by slogan, it's youth ownership by example. Prisoners behind plows. And then there's perhaps the most unexpected twist in Traoré's vision: the inclusion of inmates. Across several correctional facilities, prisoners have been transformed from liabilities to contributors. Under the state's Agricultural Reintegration Initiative, ARI, convicts now farm prison lands, not just for themselves, but for surrounding communities. Inmates grow cassava, yams, and maize, learning not only to work the land, but to heal through it. Traoré described this in a national address as restorative justice through labor. It's not forced work. It's voluntary, rehabilitative, and surprisingly effective. Recidivism rates are dropping. Families of inmates are receiving food baskets, and in a country where every hand counts, even the condemned are helping build a future, more than just survival. What Traoré has built isn't just a food system, it's a social contract. One where dignity is restored through action. Where the poor aren't pitied, they're empowered. Where the economy isn't built on foreign dependency, but on communal strength. And this transformation hasn't gone unnoticed. Delegations from Guinea, Chad, and even Kenya have quietly visited these local farming hubs, not to lecture, but to learn. In an age where billion-dollar food programs often fail to reach the hungry, Burkina Faso's approach, deeply local, deeply human, has become a case study in what happens when a government believes its people are not the problem, but the solution. Yes, there are challenges. Infrastructure gaps remain. Weather patterns are still erratic, and corruption hasn't been fully eliminated. But the foundation is there. It's not built on foreign loans or Western pity. It's built on trust between the state and its citizens. And in that trust, Burkina Faso is finding something rare in global politics: sustainable hope. The future of food weaponizing independence. What if food isn't just survival, but leverage? In the final chapter of Burkina Faso's food sovereignty journey, we step beyond fields and co-ops into the war room. Because make no mistake, what Captain Ibrahim Traoré is doing is not just about ending hunger, it's about reshaping power. And the battlefield is no longer just political, it's agricultural. While the West warns of isolation and sanctions, Burkina Faso is quietly building something far more threatening to the global order than foreign military alliances: a self-reliant economy with food at its core. This is not just about feeding a nation, it's about feeding a movement, the National Food Reserve, a fortress of grain. In early 2025, Traore announced the creation of Le Réserve Nationale de la Dignité, the National Reserve of Dignity. It's not just a catchy phrase, it's a network of climate-controlled grain silos, cold storage units, and local preservation centers being constructed across all 13 regions of Burkina Faso. Each storage facility is designed to hold up to 18 months of staple food supplies: millet, maize, sorghum, dried vegetables, and smoked fish. The idea is simple. Burkina Faso must never again beg for food in exchange for submission. The reserve isn't managed by foreign contractors or multinational food giants. It's governed by a decentralized council of farmers' unions, women's groups, and traditional chiefs. The system isn't just about storing food, it's about safeguarding sovereignty.
Why? Because in Traoré's words, if the people are fed, they cannot be bribed with crumbs.
That's a radical departure from the donor-driven approach that has defined Africa's relationship with the West for decades. Secret deals, strategic seeds, but even the most patriotic economy can't thrive in total isolation. Traoré knows this. That's why behind the scenes a new web of strategic food diplomacy is forming, not with France or the IMF, but with Russia, Algeria, and parts of Asia. According to leaked intelligence from diplomatic circles, Burkina Faso is negotiating barter-style trade agreements using surplus agricultural produce and mining access in exchange for Russian grain technologies and off-grid cold storage systems, Algerian irrigation engineers and desert farming expertise, Chinese solar-powered food processing units for rural factories. These deals are deliberately kept away from the gaze of the World Trade Organization or ECOWAS scrutiny, because they're not just trade, they're independence pacts. More surprisingly, these partnerships are non-dollar based. Transactions are conducted in local currencies, gold, or in-kind exchanges. This is not just economic maneuvering. It's a deliberate dismantling of Western financial control over African development. While this move has angered Washington, Paris, and Brussels, it's being watched with quiet admiration in Accra, Kigali, and even Pretoria. A new playbook is being written, and it doesn't include Western permission, from food security to political muscle. So what does this all mean for the geopolitical future of West Africa? Traoré has made it clear. Food is not just about calories, it's about control. By becoming a net producer of food, Burkina Faso is now able to support neighboring countries in crisis, not with charity, but through conditional diplomacy. Already reports have surfaced that food convoys were sent to Mali and Niger during periods of internal unrest, on the condition that these nations also exit exploitative trade deals and begin local food reforms. It's not colonialism in reverse, it's solidarity with standards, and it's working. The Sahel Food Pact, an informal alliance between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, is now exploring shared seed banks, cross-border irrigation projects, and joint agricultural defense forces to protect farmlands from insurgents. In the halls of ECOWAS, this is being seen as a direct challenge to their relevance. In the cafes of Ouagadougou, it's being celebrated as the beginning of African federalism through food, a warning and a challenge. But this future is fragile. One bad harvest, one assassination, one betrayal from within, and the momentum could crumble. Traoré himself remains a polarizing figure. Loved by many, loathed by some, and hunted by enemies with powerful friends. Yet his message is unwavering. Let them call us poor. We are not hungry. Let them isolate us. We are together. Let them laugh at our dreams. We will build them anyway. What Burkina Faso is building is more than a food system. It is a declaration of war against dependence. A war fought not with drones or sanctions, but with seeds, sweat, and strategy. And in that war, every cassava tuber pulled from the earth, every onion harvested under the Sahel sun, is an act of resistance. What does this mean for the future of Africa? Can food sovereignty truly be the foundation of political independence? Is this the beginning of a new African doctrine? Drop your thoughts below. Like, comment, and share this video so the world sees what mainstream media won't show you. This isn't just about Burkina Faso anymore. This is about what happens when a continent stops waiting to be fed and starts feeding itself. Share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe now.